Financial institutions around the world are facing a raft of challenges, from new, tougher regulations to pressures on keeping costs under control. More clients also now expect a smooth, efficient experience from their bank, which embraces the latest technology. But are the banks keeping up with these demands? Well, to find out more, I'm joined today by Marc Murphy, the CEO of Fenergo. I'm Faye Barker, and welcome to the Business Debate. Marc, welcome to the London Stock Exchange studios.
I'm delighted to be here.
Now, first of all, what are the main challenges facing financial institutions at the moment?
Well, if you were sitting in the CEO's seat of a bank and if you look at the top three things that's facing them today, within that top three you will have digital transformation and regulation. And they're two of the primary tailwinds that Fenergo are focused on in terms of helping them. If you look at the fintech revolution and what's happening in fintech, and you look at banks needing to be safe from a global systemically important or domestically systemically important, banks need to be safe for society. So they're two of the three, I would say, most important topics for the CEO.
And how challenging is this? Will it be easy to solve these problems?
No, if you look in the middle office of a lot of these banks and the operational functions, there's tens of thousands of people who are really processing stuff manually. And actually, when you break down every regulation, it tends to be centered around data, the processing of data, the cleansing of data, the deduplication of data, and then the collection of documents that evidence what the customer is actually saying. So it's ripe with opportunity to actually truly automate it and to make it better. From a cost perspective, the regulatory burden on banks has been huge, and obviously right across the globe, banks now, as we're 10 years on from the original Lehman crisis, and banks are really starting to canvass the regulators to try and take the burden off. But from what we can see, that isn't going away.
But when it comes to compliance then, what are the main things that have changed since the financial crisis 10 years ago?
Well, ultimately, when the Lehman crisis occurred, one of the primary problems was banks couldn't identify which counterparties they were dealing with had the biggest exposures. And what the regulatory agenda has done in that instance is made it very clear where the risk lies. Knowing your customer and understanding who the ultimate beneficial ownership lies with in terms of who you're interacting with has been very important. Obviously, the tax regime in terms of what happened with FATCA and CRS have also been very important. And I think banks are in just a much more solid place because of what's come. If a CEO of a bank was sitting here, he'd be shaking his head thinking, but look at how much it's cost us. Did it have to be so burdensome on us? Personally, I think we're better for it. It's been a pain for those banks, but I think we're coming out the other side of that now.
I mean, looking at regulation technology, how does this help banks and indeed their clients?
Well, if you go back 10 years ago, this was a fire burning. And with fires burning, the quickest thing to do is throw people at it. So banks outsourced a lot of this to the big four consulting firms. They hired aggressively into compliance departments just to face off with it in the old-fashioned way. After a cycle of that spend, people are starting to take a step back and realise, you know what, it doesn't have to be just about people. Let's get the technology right, let's invest, and the savings from regulatory technology solutions are huge. And people are starting to see within these institutions that there are better, smarter ways. And that's what tends to happen with a lot of these things. And I think regulatory technology is a great example of that.
The financial climate is just changing all the time. Really, we've had these massive changes in the last 10 years, as we saw, since the financial crisis. So looking forwards, what do you think are going to be the main challenges and hurdles that banks are facing?
The regulatory agenda isn't going away. And I think we're safer and better for it. I think it will slow down and it won't be as onerous and burdensome on the institutions. But for me, that will continue. With the intersection to the digital transformation and digital revolution, in my mind, we have a fabulous opportunity just to do it more economically, more efficiently, with less people and in a much smarter way. Ultimately, delivering a better client experience to customers and it not being so hard and tough on them. There's lots of examples where customers are being asked for the same documents many times in the same day from the same bank. And the experience has to change and improve. And I think where regulation and digital intersect gives us that real chance.
Okay, interesting times. Marc Murphy, CEO of Fenergo. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Do join us again on The Business Debate when we'll be looking at smart cities and fintech.